Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
Hello and welcome to Living on the Edge. This week on our program, 3 days in one of the most inhospitable parts of the Himalayas to show you how inhabitants survive with little or no resources, how the food that you waste finds its way into the stomachs of those who need it most, and a never-before look at how the petrol that keeps your vehicles running fuels the ill health of petrol pump attendants. But first, a visit to one of the most inhospitable parts of the Himalayas. Kinnaur in Himachal Pradesh is a living example of how people living in a harsh environment survive with little or no resources. Tisha Srivastava found that the secret of their success is a sort of ecological common sense, something most of us lack.
Dark grey, green, black and blue. The mountains of the Kinnaur region of Himachal Pradesh come in many such brooding shades. They're beautiful, breathtaking and treacherous. Because survival here is an everyday challenge. Resources are hard to come by and man must make do with what he has.
We are right now in a place called Khab in the Kinnaur region of Himachal Pradesh. Contrary to its name, Khab in Urdu means a dream. But the living conditions here are almost nightmarish. From unpredictable floods to landslides, the people here are largely dependent on the benevolence of the mountains and on their own spirit for survival.
To suddenly see green in the midst of such barrenness almost makes you feel that an apsara was sent down to do up this harsh landscape. The local residents, of course, have their own version.
Actually, this water source is very old. The legend has it that there was a bet between our Lama and our Devta. The Devta overnight brought the water from 12 kilometers away and made a mandir also.
To an observer, the reality is much less romantic. Every year in May and June, the menfolk climb a steep 15 kilometers to reach the glacier, where they work to divert the water to their villages. This is because Kinnaur lies in a rain shadow area. It receives very little rain and water is as precious as the rarest metal, with the entire community involved in conservation. In Marco, for instance, the central pond is filled with pure glacier water and is a common property resource. Despite the man-made availability of the water resource, it is unreal to find crops actually growing on such lifeless, rocky soil. Yet, potatoes, peas, wheat, barley and millets are grown here, and the produce goes all the way to Delhi as well. The secret to that lies in every Kinnauri house. It's the room where human excreta is stored. To the villagers, it's worth its weight in gold as fertilizer. In fact, there's a saying that a guest who eats in the village and fails to leave evidence of it behind is a rude guest indeed. Although government subsidies on chemical fertilizers exist, local people swear by what they call insani khad, the preferred fertilizer.
About 4 to 5 years ago, the apples we grew used to remain fresh for over a year. But now they rot within 6 months. The only reason could be chemical fertilizers, which we didn't use earlier.
Along with human night soil, animal excreta is also being used as fertilizer by villagers. Even when the houses are swept, all the dust is used to cover it. Pine needles and sand are used to cover the potential sources of foul smell And they do a fairly good job, though much of this may be distasteful to the average viewer. It is really an extreme reaction to an extreme situation, as survival is the only thing that matters. In fact, in earlier days, animals slept in the same room as humans to make fertilizer collection more effective. Even now, when the winter chill descends, it is only dried vegetables stored from the previous summer that sees them through.
Vegetables that we grow in summer, we bury them and keep them in sacks and store them for the winter. We store them inside the house. Being mud houses, there is no dampness.
गोभी फूल गोभी
अच्छा और ये जो मतलब जो हम सुखा के रखते कहाँ हैं ये सब
सब सुखा के फिर बोरियों में भर के घर में रख देते
घर के अंदर ही रखते
घर के अंदर ही रखते
तो वहाँ खराब वराब नहीं होती है
नहीं होती
मतलब इतना
नमी नहीं होती ना मिट्टी के घर है
मिट्टी का ऐसा है जी सर्दियों में हमारा
In winter, mud houses keep you warm. It gets very cold here. Doesn't snow, but it gets chilly. Cement, on the other hand, leaves your house cold.
तो मिट्टी में थोड़ा गर्माइश है इसलिए हम मिट्टी के बनाते हैं
अच्छा और यहाँ सीमेंट का काम
सीमेंट का बहुत कम बहुत नाम मात्र का है जी ठंड न होने से सीमेंट नहीं इस्तेमाल करते
This is because mud houses are less likely to fall apart in landslides and earthquakes, which have been known to occur here. They're less likely to permanently disable locals than unreliable cement structures. Winter months push villagers to their severest test each year. There's no water, no electricity, no cultivation, and no grass for the animals. And that's why the rest of the year is spent preparing for winter.
वैसे दिक्कत जी काफी है रोड ब्लॉक हो जाती है
The winter season brings major problems. Water sources dry up and the roads are blocked. There is no electricity and we can't grow anything. We have to eat dried vegetables of the previous summer.
पानी का और खाने पीने की भी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है अगर ये सुखाते नहीं ये सुखा के खाना पड़ता है सब्जी वगैरह और सारे सुखा के खाते हैं
Is it any wonder then that they protect everything they have, including trees like these, from hungry livestock? Even chilli, a local tree seed which is made into a cooling, moisturizing oil, is carefully conserved. The fruit is used to brew liquor, and the barks and the branches are used for fuel. It's as much of this fastidious ecological sense as their religion that keeps them going. Being Tibetan Buddhists, they have a temple in each home, as well as a resident Devta and Lama reflected in the flag outside each house. And all over the village, one finds beautiful inscriptions on stones, relics of days gone by. In this aspect, and with the landscape, Kinnaur has more in common with Ladakh than Himachal itself. It's probably this faith and sense of destiny that keeps them going. But even here, the common complaint is that men don't do as much work as the women.
हमारे ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा और लोग करते हैं काम
In our village, women do most of the work. In a house with 2 sons and 2 daughters, the sons are hardly made to do any work. This is not fair. They should help us. After all, you can never make chapatis with one hand.
Whichever way the women look at it, the thought of moving to cities and giving up their harsh existence doesn't appeal much.
We would not like to go and live in the city. We are used to the open air and mountains, and we would not be able to cope up with the heat and pollution of the city.
We don't have barbers and all that, yet the body is very fit in this fresh air.
So much for city comforts. The Kinnauris are happy not looking beyond their mountains. Their story is one of being content with what they have. And surely there's a lesson in that for all of us.
Though it may sound unbelievable in Kinnaur, many of us, particularly in urban areas, think little of wastage. Wastage of fuel, wastage of water and even food. S.R. Kiran of Hyderabad wanted us to show viewers what changes they can make in their everyday lives to help conservation. Well, to begin with, you can prevent the wastage of food at home and when you go out to eat. Shonar Joshi reports on the unique effort of a voluntary group that collects surplus food and distributes it to needy citizens on an everyday basis.
Here's a scene we're all familiar with, a marriage party with lots of people and plenty of food. On occasions such as this, the quantity of food cooked far outstrips consumption. And would it surprise you to know that up to 1/4 of it will be wasted before the night is out?
So it is a cultural aspect of people who can afford to waste. People may not eat all that they order or ask for. That happens at homes also, I think, parties, dinner receptions.
Up to 40% of our population goes without a single square meal every day.
Those who have food can afford to throw it. We can't. If you give a hungry man food, it's good. How does a man who's got enough to eat know what hunger is?
There is enough food for everyone in the world at the rate of 2,500 calories per person per day. This is 200 calories above the minimum required. And yet, some 800 million people go to sleep hungry around the world.
We cater around to 2,000 people every month. And a normal person consumes around 350 grams of food.
How much of this is being wasted?
Around 20%.
It's obvious that some caterers take wastage for granted, particularly in a country where food once touched by the eating hand is considered contaminated or jhuta. But is it so difficult to digest the fact that wastage can be reduced, if not avoided, and excess food distributed to those who need it most?
Food which is leftovers from the banquet parties and things like that, we would have used it in the staff cafeteria otherwise, but certain things, like, naan rotis which are left over. Now that is, people would like to have fresh naan rotis, you see, so we can't use it for the staff.
But the AWB Food Bank has found a way of using what would otherwise have found its way to a dustbin. Combat hunger is their motto, and they are fighting to ensure that as many people as possible get what they need to survive.
It's a very serious matter in a poor country like ours, where numerous people don't get food to eat. We must save all the food we can.
As a first step, the project, which began in 1991, secured 100 free meals every day for needy citizens, using a single hotel as a source. Today, many of Delhi's leading eateries are involved in the effort, and 2,500 people are prevented from going hungry every day.
This is very good. Better than wasting all this food is to feed a hungry child.
And they are doing a very good job.
Leftover food, which would ordinarily have been wasted, finds its way into AWB cans. It's then reheated and becomes a complete meal. Even though food supplies to the bank are increasing rapidly, AWB officials remember a time when food wasn't easy to come by.
Earlier, when it was initial stages, people had little hesitation because while donating cooked food, if anything spoiled goes to the donees or users, that may defame their name.
That's why the AWB has taken quality control measures at every step. Quantities suited to individual establishments are weighed and separated to avoid further wastage of food. Voluntary organizations in the capital have stepped in to see that food reaches people who need it the most.
One very good organization like a Renaissance has come forward. They will have the share of serving the food, and we will have our share of collecting the food.
Although nature can create local food shortages, it is us human beings who turn these shortages into widespread famines. The global food pie is big enough for all of us. People go hungry because they can't afford a slice of that pie. What redistribution networks like AWB are doing has successfully destroyed the most common excuse trotted out by habitual food wasters. How can my wasting or not wasting affect a starving man miles away? Every grain makes a difference.
If every grain of food counts, so does every drop of petrol. It's expensive and fast depleting. But did you know that workers who fill your tanks suffer from a number of common ailments? Divyanshu Shekhar, a class 11 student of Patna, has sent us the findings of a study he did on petrol pump workers with 4 of his friends. 100% of them suffered from eye irritations, whereas 75% suffered from headaches, weaknesses, breathing problems and such similar kinds of problems. This research won Bihar the first prize in the recently concluded National Children's Science Congress. Shonar Joshi decided to use this report as a starting point and did her own investigation. Here's her report.
Workers who are employed at the petrol pumps for the purpose of refilling and distribution of the petrol finally to the motor vehicles, they suffer from occupational hazards. They get weakness, they get headache, body ache and stomach pain.
Workers are so used to the smell of petrol and it has become so much a part of their lives that they never stop to consider that petrol fumes could be harmful to them. Tetraethyl lead in petrol causes high blood pressure, heart attacks, liver damage and kidney disorders.
As far as the occupational hazards are concerned, the regulation within the industries, in the petroleum industry for the workers, there has been no checks and no awareness.
In these circumstances, one would have thought that the introduction of unleaded fuel for new cars would have made things better for workers. But benzene, a vital component of the new fuel, is known to be cancer-causing and even evaporates from fuel tanks. This would make petrol pump workers particularly vulnerable as the new fuel becomes increasingly available around the country.
In other countries other than India, the people shifted to unleaded petrol and now they are again switching over to the leaded petrol.
The British Parliament's Transport Committee has called for a ban on unleaded fuel by 1996. Independent analysts argue that the drawbacks of unleaded fuel can be controlled to a certain extent by catalytic converters. But this has little meaning for petrol pump attendants who are susceptible to emissions even during storage and refueling. We never got a chance to put this to petrol pump owners who consistently refused requests for interviews. Strangely enough, it wasn't worker health they were concerned about. They told us off camera that they were worried that our filming would reveal spray painting of cars on the premises. Apparently, spray painting isn't allowed in a petrol pump because the chances of visitors being affected by metallic paint are greater.
Seems weird. I get a cough while doing this. There's another paint, metallic paint. That is more hazardous. You get TB from that.
But this doesn't mean that working conditions of ordinary petrol pump attendants are any better. The accidental ingestion of petrol can have unpredictable consequences.
Once it happened. It got into my eyes and I grew dizzy. There were tears in my eyes. I wanted to vomit. When you open the carburetor with the thinner, after some time it's like a fire coming out of my hands.
What makes this worse is the lack of medical facilities for workers. Few employers consider themselves accountable. After all, lakhs of people suffer from pollution-related ailments in each of our cities, and workers they feel can't afford to be fussy. In the end,
This is what emerges as the most worrying facet of petrol pump duties, not the employee's plight, but the indifference that prevails towards it. By recycling 75% of the world's paper, over 35 million trees could be saved each year.